Today's guest is living proof that even the darkest rock bottom does not have to mean the end of your story. Angie spent almost 2 decades addicted to heroin. She's been to jail, she's been homeless, she's overdosed, and she nearly lost 3 limbs to infections caused by her injecting. And yet, here she is. She's clean and using her voice to help others find their way out of the abyss. But let's be real, recovery is not a straight line, and Angie chased every fix from ibogaine clinics to pills and false promises. She survived the unthinkable, watching both of her parents die just 3 months apart, and then battling the ache of feeling orphaned and alone, yet still she chose to rebuild her life. This episode is raw and it's brutal, but it's hopeful. And most importantly, it's for anyone that thinks they are too far gone to ever come back. Welcome to Stef Tea, where every week I'm going to introduce you to the people behind jaw-dropping, life-altering, true stories from all over the world. I'm Stefanie Jones, TV host, storyteller, and your partner in crime for the wildest podcast ride you've ever been on. Each episode, you'll hear shocking stories that'll make you realize we humans are capable of anything. Now, let's spill the tea. Take me back to the very start. Talk to me about your childhood. What was your upbringing like?
I had a great childhood. I was a cheerleader from when I was 6 years old all the way up through high school. I was very active, had a lot of friends. My parents loved me. I was a good student. I was one of those students that had perfect attendance. I went on to college and it was really nothing out of the ordinary.
So how do you go from like this stereotypical cheerleader, this perfect attendance and great family? What happened then when you were first introduced to drugs?
So many people connect and associate addiction with childhood trauma. And for the longest time, when I was in like the depths of my addiction, I would spend time thinking, did something happen that I don't remember? We are kind of conditioned to believe that addiction really very rarely occurs from a quote unquote normal childhood. And some sort of previous trauma is kind of a prerequisite. I never had any childhood trauma. When I was in high school, my friends would smoke weed all the time. We would go out into the middle of the woods and have parties and drink, but I never truly enjoyed it. And I began smoking weed in the beginning of my freshman year in high school. Never really affected me, but I had a negative experience where the joint that we smoked one day was like laced with something, and I literally tripped out. I thought I was dying. And from then on, I just stopped smoking weed for a long time. Even on my 21st birthday, I didn't get drunk. I didn't drink. I went on to grad school wanting to please my father in some ways, become, successful in the traditional sense. When I graduated, I had a semester off. And that's really when I found drugs. I didn't have school anymore. I was waiting tables. And that's when I found, cocaine. And all my friends had been doing it prior to that. And it really wasn't that big of a deal. I remember when I tried it the first time and I was like, oh, this is great. I'm having a fabulous time. And that's where it really started. I went off to grad school. I'm going to become some sort of therapist and have my own practice. I went to Boston University. I loved BU. I loved being there. Shortly thereafter, I was placed in an internship. I don't recall if they gave me the choice, but I ended up being placed in a halfway house for addiction. And foreshadowing at its best, really, because I was still somewhat normal. I thought I was normal, even though I really was partying too hard and I had a coke problem, but I didn't realize it yet. I started this internship and I fell in love with the clients and the people that work there, right? I had met through this internship this person who was an admitted heroin addict. At that time, I was still using coke. I would go to work in this halfway house, have to have urine tests and things for the clients, and say somebody tested positive for a drug, I would have to kick them out of the program. And then I'd go home to my apartment and do drugs, but without really even thinking twice about it, thinking that I was different because I was controlling it. So after a little while of doing that, I finally had the realization that, okay, this is not normal. I think that I have a problem with this because I would look forward to the weekends. Oh, I can't wait to like party all weekend. And I would stay up all weekend for like 2 days, 3 days. And then I'd come home, do my term papers and my schoolwork for graduate school up, 3 or 4 in the morning with no sleep. And that was how I lived for a little while. It was working at that program and learning about addiction directly from the addicts and hearing the stories and about 12-step programs and learn recovery where I started putting the pieces together like, okay, maybe I need to stop doing this. So I started to go to meetings myself. I'm not going to lie, I wasn't fully committed at all, but I managed to stay clean and sober for a little over a year. And then once I graduated, I was sober, but my reality was changing because I had to start looking for a big girl job and getting licensed. My schedule changed, my routine changed. And then once I found a job in another addiction program with clients who were dually diagnosed, they were addiction issues, homelessness, and diagnosed with HIV and AIDS. It was a very difficult job. I lost like 4 clients within a year period of time. I didn't have time, so what I told myself to go to meetings. So I stopped going to meetings and eventually I just relapsed. Yeah, I had some health issues. I ended up in the hospital. I had PCOS. I ended up with some female issues. I had to have surgery. That's when I discovered the opiate high for the first time.
Right.
I was prescribed Dilaudid for the pain. I was prescribed Percocets. Hindsight is 2020, but I didn't even realize what I had stumbled across. I found that high after the surgery. I was like, wow, I feel amazing. Once the pain meds ran out, I started buying them off the street, the Percocets, because I told myself I was still in so much pain, I needed them for the surgery. Within a couple weeks, I was sniffing heroin, and then a week later, I was using needles. It was very, very quick progression for me. It was just within like a couple month period of time, I went from realizing that the opiate high is great to using needles. I was a licensed clinical therapist and I was still working and I thought I could control it, but it was such a rapid progression. Within a year, I was broke, lost my apartment, lost my job, lost my license, my social working license because when you become a felon, the state of Massachusetts doesn't really like that very much. I lost my license to practice, which I didn't really care.
You didn't value the things that you had got, I suppose, whether it was your career, your education. If you don't really care in the first place, it's not going to super affect you, I suppose.
Exactly, exactly. So I really just had no connection to the life that I was living. So losing any of those things was just like, it was really like no big deal for me.
So you'd been dabbling a little bit throughout the start of your career. And then after the surgery is when things escalated after having that opium high. And it's such a common thing here, especially in the United States. People do get addicted to the pain medication specifically very, very quickly. But you've gone from having it prescribed by the hospital post surgery to you then seeking it out on the streets, convincing yourself you're still in pain, you still need this medication. Obviously, the pain medication is one thing and the heroin is something completely different. I've always been told that once you try heroin, you're instantly addicted. I don't know if that's true or not. Like that's it. It's like got a hold on your body and your body will be seeking that out forevermore. So what happened on that day when you thought today's the day I'm going to try heroin? Did anything happen? Like, or did you just not get enough high from the other substances that you were taking? Like, or
I remember it was my birthday, my 24th birthday, and my friend that I was with was using heroin. And I had seen it and it was in my reality, but I still had that thought in the back of my head like it's bad. But that it was like getting less and less and less the more I was kind of exposed to it. Also, one of the things that we're told too was that the only way you can do it is with a needle. And I was like, "I'll never use needles." So when I found out that you could actually sniff it, I was like, "Oh, I can do that." It seemed so much less harmful, and it just seemed like it made it better, like the mode of transmission, the way you do it. So I was like, "Oh, okay." And then when I found that out, it was like almost instantaneously, I wanna try it then.
if you've been taking cocaine, and the way you take cocaine most times is you sniff the substance. So
Right.
you obviously are already comfortable with that method of taking in drugs. I can understand why you would see that as being a bit, oh, well, I already do that. So it's just a different substance.
Right, right. So I mean, it made it a lot less scary for me. And I remember it was on my birthday, and I was like, It's my birthday. I want to try," like almost in like this celebratory manner, which is just crazy. But I mean, when you're used to that lifestyle, it's a kind of a normal thing to do. And I said to my friend, "I want to try it." And it was one of those things like, "Oh, well, you're not allowed to use the needle. You can only sniff it." There's this idea also in the addict community where it's like not as bad if you sniff it. So the time from when I first used it, and I absolutely fell in love with it, I was like, this is amazing. It filled some sort of void. I can use this and still sleep. I can still go to work every day because, Coke, I'd be up all night and I'd have to go to work the next day and not be able to function. So I was like, this is a perfect substance. I can use it at night and still sleep all night and then be able to wake up for work the next day. I remember it like it was yesterday. Then it just progressed from then on. Within a week of me sniffing it, I was using needles. I mean, it didn't take long. I had no purpose in life, and finding that gave me a purpose. Like, it was the reason I got out of bed in the morning. As sad and sick as it sounds, that's the reason why I kept pursuing it time and time and time again, even though it declined very, very quickly. Once you become physically addicted and you need it, and you start becoming sick and getting sick when you don't have it, that drive becomes necessary. You can't live without it. It's that excitement is gone because it starts bringing negative consequences into your life, but you feel like you have to keep choosing it over and over and over again because you don't have an option. It really feels like you don't have a choice.
What was that initial heroin high feeling like? How would you describe that first initial hit? What is the sensation that comes over you?
I felt euphoric. It's a euphoric. It's like your body, it's a warm and fuzzy feeling all over. I felt like I was like floating. It was just an overwhelming sense of calmness, almost, of relaxation. And I remember the first time I got sick from it. It was late in the afternoon, and I felt my legs becoming very restless. And restless legs is one of the symptoms of withdrawal symptoms. I was sitting in an office chair, and I remember my legs started getting really restless, and I was like swinging my legs and stretching them out in front of me. And I was like, "What is this feeling?" I didn't really know until a couple days later when I went high and then I felt better and I kind of figured it out. But that didn't happen for about a month or 2 after I started using. But it was one of those things where I couldn't wait to use, I couldn't wait to get high. And when you find something that gives you that great feeling, you don't wanna let it go no matter what it is. It was a very rapid decline. I mean, I lost my job. I started falling asleep and nodding out in staff meetings. I was late all the time. My boss had called me into her office one day and gave me a pamphlet referring me to therapy or to some sort of treatment, me thinking that I was still hiding it perfectly well, like
Yeah,
I was
you
fine,
thought no one can tell.
but I mean, I was working in an addiction program. Like everybody I was working with was sober. Everybody knew what was happening except for me. And so what did I do? I quit that job before I got fired because I didn't want to go to therapy. And then I found another job relatively quickly in an adolescent um, jail. The probationary period was like 90 days. And I didn't even last that long. I lived 5 minutes from the job and I was late every single day. I would completely miss meetings. That was the point when I started just using in the morning before work. I would go and cop drugs during my lunchtime. And then I got let go from that job. Shocker. Once the money ran out, I started committing crimes and stealing and selling. I started getting arrested. I started accumulating felonies. I started probation. It was pretty quick after that.
What was the moment that you actually realized, oh, this has gone too far?
I was so delusional. I had gone through all my money, lost my apartment. Even though all these things were happening, I felt like, oh, well, if I'm going to be a junkie, I have to put up with these junkie consequences, right? This is just part of the lifestyle. Like I started to accept that reality for myself. And it wasn't until I think I started to get arrested when I'm trying to, and it's baffling to me that I don't even, can't even recall a time when I thought this is too much. I was put on probation and I had to report to probation and I didn't go. I had opportunities. It's not like I didn't know what to do. It's not like I didn't know that I could go to detox. I knew it was possible, but it's like I got to a point where it was okay for me to keep getting arrested all the time and to be on probation and to have warrants and use every single penny that I had to drugs.
Your dad was helping you financially. Was he saying to you, what's going on? You had this job that was amazing. Why are you not doing it anymore? Why do you need money? Like, was he asking you those questions? And how did you get around that and get him to give you money in those situations?
My parents were out of state, so I don't even know how much they knew of what was going on. But within like the first 6 months of my addiction, and my old friends that I grew up with had found out that I was using, and they kind of did this intervention on me. They called my parents and told my parents that
Hmm.
I had been using needles and that I had been doing heroin. And of course, everybody freaked out. They showed up at my front door. My parents were like, "Ange, like, what is happening?" And I just convinced them somehow that everything was fine and I wasn't really using it, even though I really was all the time. They knew that I was an addict, but it was like, don't ask, don't tell. It wasn't really talked about. And that was kind of a dynamic in my family where things just kind of got swept under the rug. I was so good at manipulating. I became an expert. Like, I kept everything looking okay on the outside. He somehow found out when I was homeless and I didn't have any place to stay because he kept asking me, "Well, where are you living? Where are you staying?" And I would give a lie and be like, "Oh, I'm staying with a friend." And "Well, what's the address?" Kind of trying to catch me. And I knew that he knew. And that's when he really started helping really financially because he started paying. He put me, in a cheap motel, which I ended up getting kicked out of because I was a menace, and then that kind of escalated to eventually he just started paying for a roof over my head in general, just to kind of do the best that he could to keep me safe. He was enabling me, but honestly, my parents really had no idea to the extent of what was happening. My mom, I kind of stopped talking to because I couldn't face her. I couldn't lie to her anymore. But my dad, he was just trying to do the best he could to keep me safe.
You would have spent whatever money you had. It wouldn't have necessarily been on like accommodation. It would have still been on the heroin at the end of the day. So
Exactly, and that's exactly what happened. Like, I didn't eat, I lived off of gummy bears. Drugs were always the first choice every single day, every second of every day. I wasn't showering, I wasn't eating. I was a mess. 17 years of just getting arrested and living in filth and treating myself like garbage. So it was really just like Groundhog Day. One thing about my addiction, though, it brought my father and I so much closer together because he started showing up when I'd get arrested. He'd bail me out of jail. He would come to my court dates, drive me to detox, drive me to programs. So we got very close throughout my addiction. We talked every single day. After my 16th year of my heroin addiction, the longest time I stayed clean for that entire period of time was only 11 days. In 2018, a friend of mine came into a couple $1,000 and we were like, let's go away somewhere and kick this habit one last time. We came to Mexico and I detoxed. So I stayed in Mexico for about a year. Less than a year after I had come to Mexico, my dad had an unexpected heart attack. So a friend of mine paid for a flight and I flew back to the States to be with him. He declined pretty rapidly. I had been using the entire time. I was still strung out. He was in the hospital dying. I really didn't know he was going to die. When he died, in September of 2019. He was helping me financially. He was paying for my rent. I lost everything in like an instant. And I was like, how am I going to survive? It was very ugly. It was very ugly because I was using and doing anything necessary to keep using. And I even stole from my dad while he was dying in the hospital, something I never, ever, ever, ever thought that I would do. I hated myself for doing that. He had me arrested. It was a mess. I did my best to just kind of escape that situation as best as I could, and I came back to Mexico. I got back in November, like 2 months after my dad died, and then December 2nd, my mom died. The circumstances around it were just straight out of a Jerry Springer episode. My life was a complete and utter disaster. I thought my heroin addiction was bad. It was absolutely nothing compared to losing both of my parents the way I did. Then I went on to lose absolutely everything in a really ugly probate situation where my brother came for everything and I was completely ostracized. I mean, I know my addiction put me into that position and I take responsibility for the bad decisions that I made, but it was the hardest thing. I lost all the money that I had access to. I didn't have access to heroin. I spiraled mentally and everything just came kind of crashing down. I lost all interest in essentially being alive. And I know now that if I had gotten what was essentially mine to get, I probably would have died.
You've mentioned your brother, what your relationship is with him now, if you have one. But do you think in any way he was trying to help you by saying, if I cut off everything, it will force her to stop?
I say no to that only because he was acting out of resentment. I don't hate him. I have no resentment towards him. I mean, from somebody from the outside looking in, maybe who didn't know how close I was with my dad, they're going to see just like a junkie trying to take advantage of a situation, right? But that just wasn't the case. But also, back in the beginning of my addiction, when I was like 26, 25 years old, I stole a lot of money from my brother. I stole a lot of checks and I wrote myself checks and he found out and he pressed charges and I tried to apologize after that. It was like $10,000. It was a lot of money. So my brother had a lot of resentment and probably still does today. We hadn't spoken since that situation when I stole a bunch of money from him. He refused to speak to me from then on. So I wasn't
Mm.
invited for holidays, for dinners or anything like that where my brother was going to be there because my brother essentially said, if she's there, I'm not going to show up. When I showed up after my dad, when he was in the ICU after his heart attack, it was clear as I was kind of blindsided with the hatred he had for me. I had no idea he had been holding on to that resentment for essentially 15 years. I mean, granted, yes, I was making awful decisions and being a menace, but it felt like he was trying to ostracize me purposefully and make me suffer. And I'm not putting all the blame on him. I don't hate him, but it was a lot. So I really don't think it had anything to do with him trying to help me. It felt a lot like trying to get some sort of revenge for what I had done 15 years prior. It was like a piece of jealousy, a piece of revenge, some resentment. It was like all of that combined into one. And then when my parents died, it was like, okay, finally I can take all of this frustration out on you. That's what it felt like. And when my mom died, like I didn't know that my mom was sick. Nobody told me. My brother didn't tell me that my mom was in the hospital. I was messaging my mom the whole time that I was up with my dad, and my brother had blocked me from my own mother's phone. So the messages that I was sending, my mom wasn't even getting them. I didn't know where my mom was. I showed up at her place. I had to like track her down. I finally found her, and it was the first time I had seen her in way too long, years and years and years. Because, like I said, I had stopped talking to her. We hugged, and I sat in the bed with her. She was like in this home, like a live-in kind of hospital. I just sat in bed with her, and we talked. When I found out she passed, I got just a text message from my brother. And when my dad died, I wasn't in the obituary. I don't even know if there was a funeral. I wasn't invited. I couldn't go to my mom's services because I was back in Mexico and I couldn't afford a plane ticket. I didn't want any more problems with him. He sent me a really nasty message. I still have them actually on my phone. Essentially, he said to me, my only requirement after all this is done is that we never be in contact ever again, which is fine. I have no resentment. I don't hate him. He obviously has his own issues that I really, truly hope that he healed from. It's just a really crappy situation.
If your brother was somehow listening to this, what would you want to say to him?
At the end of the day, even when I was going through all those things, I was just a little girl who wanted the approval of her older brother. Do you know what I'm saying? He was so cool in my eyes when I was a kid. Honestly, I would apologize. I would apologize even though I've tried to do that in the past. Like, I don't hate you. I know from the outside looking in, it looked like I was taking advantage. I take responsibility for my part for what I did. I truly do. I just hope that he finds peace.
You've mentioned very transparently that you have been through jail, through homelessness, you've had overdoses. For
Mhm.
you, what was the lowest moment that you can recall?
One of the things that really was gut wrenching for me to experience was a couple times I would get arrested and have warrants. And so I would be held in the courthouse and have to stay the weekend. And I'm pale and I'm sweaty and I'm like this thin. And I walk up into the courtroom and my dad's sitting there. And it's such a humbling, like, how embarrassing. And anytime he would, like, when he bailed me out of jail, I had been detoxing from methadone, benzos, and heroin, which was just awful, and all cold turkey, because when you're in jail, it's all cold turkey. And I was emaciated. I had lost more weight, like 20 pounds. I was sick, hadn't slept the whole time, and kind of like reality being forced in my face whenever he would see me like that.
Mm.
He knew that there was really nothing he could do. I think what takes the cake, though, was at the end when I made the decision to steal from him while he was dying in the hospital. That trumps it all now that I think about it. I would steal from stores. I would steal from big corporations, people who could afford it, right? That's kind of what made me feel better. I would never steal from people, and especially not my parents, right? And it took me a long time to even say it out loud. I couldn't even like verbalize the fact that I did that because I was so ashamed of myself for that. I justified it in my own brain, like, well, he was going to give it to me anyways, right? He gives me more than this on a monthly basis. He was paying my rent and now he's, debilitated in the hospital and he can't function. So, like, what am I supposed to do? My solution to that was to just take it. That was awful because I was at the bank and the cops pulled up and the cop was on the phone and handed me the phone and it was my dad. And he swore, he was like, and you effed up. They arrested me, took me to the police station. They took my car away. The last time I saw my dad, I had
Mm.
to swallow my pride and walk through the fear and go see him in the hospital after that day. And I remember I sat, and he wasn't even lucid anymore, really. I don't even know if he knew I
Mm.
was there. But I sat next to his bed and I was like, I just apologized. I said, I'm sorry. I've been such a piece of crap daughter.
You almost lost three of your limbs from injecting.
Mm.
What happened?
I started getting, now abscesses are infections. They're essentially staph infections from using needles, from bacteria. I had stopped showering. I was living in Phil. And I never did laundry. Everything looking okay, but underneath my clothes and everything, I was a mess. So I started getting these infections, abscesses. I had started getting this infection on my right ankle. Was getting them pretty regularly. Sometimes, if it got bad enough, I would have to go to the hospital and they'd have to drain it, stuff cotton in it, give me some antibiotics, and send me on my way. This one on my ankle, it started looking a lot different than a regular abscess. It was like an open wound. I ended up going to the hospital, and all of a sudden, there's like 12 doctors, and they're taking
Mhm.
pictures of my ankle. And I was like, okay, if the doctors are taking pictures, this is not good. So essentially, what had happened was I got some of that bad batch. It was called crocodile. It was like a dope derivative. So apparently, it's a cheaper thing, and it was like a skin flesh eating drug. It was whatever they put in it was awful. I came very close to losing my right foot. I was in the hospital for 3 months. They did 3 surgeries. I had to have a skin graft done where they took a huge piece of skin from the front of my thigh, and they put it on my ankle so that it would heal because it was such a big open wound. Like, you could see my bone. I couldn't walk. When I got discharged, I got readmitted again a week later because it had gotten infected. And wouldn't you know, the first thing I did when I got discharged was get high. It didn't even phase me. I stopped using my arms, because I ran out of veins. So I used my entire body. My legs, my feet, my hands, my arms, my chest, my boobs, my stomach, my rib cage, under my feet, my fingers, my palms. If I could reach it, I was using it. A lot of times I would use my legs because nobody ever saw my legs. I was always wearing pants. This one particular time I had 3 really bad abscesses that are really deep into the tissue. The longer you wait and the worse the infection is, the deeper it goes and it can get into your bone and into your joint. And a lot of times they'll have to amputate. I had one behind my knee and then I had another one on my thigh, but it was so deep. I had 3 total. and they were all just in really critical locations. It had gotten a little too close to the joint behind my knee. I couldn't access heroin. I was going to the pharmacy and I was buying liquid Suboxone and Suboxone patches. I was using those to get high. So this one particular, I remember it like it was yesterday. I went into the bathroom and I skin popped a shot right into my shoulder. And as soon as I did it, I knew something was wrong. I felt this sharp pain just go all the way down. I ignored it, thinking that it was going to be fine. As the days went on, it got bigger and more painful. My arm was like, I looked like a Power Ranger with like an arm out to here. People I knew were like, you have to go to the hospital.
So your arm is absolutely massive at this point. People are telling you you have to go to hospital.
I go to the hospital, they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't even drain it. They literally just cut all the skin off with this huge open wound. After a month of trying to fix it, I started going septic and my legs started getting swollen and red. It was a mess. My dad bought me a ticket to go back to the States. I went to the hospital and they were like, you were just a few days away from losing my arm. With that, they had to do another skin graft, 2 surgeries, and again, I was getting high the entire time. I mean, I never learned.
So with all of these things happening, a mixture of almost losing your foot, your arm, the surgeries, at one point you did go to Mexico because you heard about ibogaine treatment.
Yes, ibogaine.
So you decided ibogaine was possibly the way out of your situation and to healing. I know that your dad paid for you to go and do that, and it was $7,000. So did you feel any, like, not necessarily guilt, but I've got to make this work because my dad's paying this money and this is meant to be the way out for me?
I randomly found out about ibogaine. It was so new back then. I thought, "This is it. This is what I've been looking for."
What is an ibogaine treatment and what made you want to go and do it?
It's plant medicine, right? Similar to ayahuasca. It's advertised as this kind of miracle thing where for opiate addiction, where you take it and essentially you go into this altered state for about 12 hours and essentially you're supposed to withdraw or detox or come off the opiate somehow. They monitor you, you kind of go in a dark room, they blindfold you, they're supposed to put an IV in you. It didn't do anything for me. Although the other people that were there, they were kind of tripping out, right? And so I was kind of scared because I didn't want to trip out really at all. I went there thinking that it was going to be the answer to my problems. I don't think they had much experience with heroin addicts as severe as I was because it was a very new thing back in 2016. So they prescribed and dosed based on weight only. They didn't really dose based on how much you were using, which would have been, I thought, the way to do it. So it didn't really do much. And also, I didn't have any veins. They couldn't get an IV in me. They tried for like an hour and a half. They just gave me the pills. I kind of fell asleep a couple times. I had a couple of weird dreams, and I was just violently dope sick after that. I was puking in the bathroom, and they were trying to get me to not to go because I was no shape to travel. But all I wanted to do was go and leave. When I got back to Boston, the first thing I did was get high because I was sick. And honestly, when I look back, I didn't want to stop using. I just wanted a quick fix. When it didn't work, I almost was excited that it didn't work because I didn't really want to stop using anyways.
You went obviously in hope of like, if this works, great. But you were kind of rolling the dice, right? If it works, great. If it doesn't, I'm just going to go back to what I know.
Didn't go as planned, that ibogaine, but honestly, there is no magic pill for this, there is no quick fix, unfortunately. So
So let's talk about obviously the fact that now you are clean and you have been clean for quite a long time. So whilst the ibogaine didn't work, something obviously did. What actually got you clean? What changed?
I used for the last time, not knowing it was going to be the last time after my mom died, and I spiraled. I was selling drugs. Like I was still living a junkie lifestyle. I was still not taking care of myself. Even though I wasn't using, I was still miserable. It had been about a year after my parents died. One day I had this realization like I was choosing to stay miserable. I didn't have a dope habit to blame. I wasn't addicted to anything. It was like a light bulb moment. That's when my whole journey started. Somewhere along the way, it's like I became unwilling to be dependent on anything anymore. Once I started to like heal and work on myself, it was a new thing for me. It was different, that's for sure.
What would you say to someone that's listening that is an addict and they just see no way out?
Well, first of all, there is no story too bad. There is no circumstance too bad. There is no addiction too severe to come back from. I feel like it's a lot about excuses because, I had lost hope. I've lost everything. I lost my parents. I've died a few times. I've almost lost limbs, jails, all the things. And so there is really no excuse that I can listen to and be like, "Oh yeah, that's hard." Because I know it's hard and it's not easy, but I can guarantee you that staying the same and keeping doing the same thing over and over, that's harder. It's harder to live like that than it is to finally choose yourself. It might feel impossible to make any kind of different choice. I know that. I lived through that. I know it feels impossible, but it's not impossible.
And what about the other way around, Angie? What about the people that are trying to support a loved one that is going through some of the things that happened to you and has got an addiction? What advice would you give them?
I know it's hard. It's so hard. And while I know that I was enabled, I also know that my dad did his best, right? He was just trying to keep me safe. I acknowledge how difficult it is because you're watching somebody burn their entire lives to the ground and seemingly not care about it. You can be supportive without enabling. Like my dad did. He never judged me for the decisions I was making. Even when he picked me up from jails and bailed me out and saw me dope sick and miserable, he never gave me a lecture because I can guarantee you that the addict, although it might seem like they don't care, they're filled with so much shame and guilt that giving someone a lecture does not help when it comes to setting boundaries. And people are so scared like, what if I set a hard boundary and do the tough love thing? That's a decision. And I always tell people you have to put yourself first because you can't put your own self on the back burner in order to support someone else.
What does life look like for you now?
I have my puppy child, India. I adopted her when I was about 6 or 7 months into my healing journey. She saved a huge piece of my soul and my heart because after years of worst case scenarios and I built this huge wall around myself. She helped me chip away at it. She loved me until I could love myself again. I'm still in Mexico. I wake up, we go to the beach every morning and she plays on the beach. I have the ability to choose, to put myself first. It's the little things for me today, really. It's like a good meal, clean sheets, a fresh bag of laundry,
Mhm.
getting, messages from people online. And I'm excited for the future for the first time in a long, long time, and it feels pretty good.
Angie is a reminder that survival doesn't always look clean or pretty, but it is always possible. From almost losing her life to addiction to building one that she never thought she deserved, she shows us all that healing isn't a choice, it's a fight. If you're listening to this and you feel like there is no way out, please hear this. There is, and Angie is living proof. Go follow her journey on the Hope Chase. And if this episode moved you, share it with someone who needs to know there is still a future waiting for them. If you liked today's episode, give it a like, share it with your besties, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. I'll see you next time for more Stef and Tea.